So here we have narcissists, psychopaths, borderlines, histrionics. Then the virus, the enemy soldiers can pop out at night and wreak absolute havoc on a cell, on a community whose defenses are down because they think they just have a nice wooden horse, a nice gift. You better be careful before you start pitying someone. If you're an adult and the other person is an adult, there probably isn't ever really a scenario where you pitying another adult isn't in some way dangerous, toxic. It has a degrading effect on the boundaries in your relationship with that person if you pity them. And people will say, okay, so no pity, but sympathy, yes, empathy, yes, compassion, yes. And I'm like, my response to that, with all due respect, but with an inevitable dose of cynicism, is a lot of people sneak pity in and call it empathy. They sneak in pity and call it sympathy or compassion. It's still pity. And it's snuck in as like a Trojan horse. You think that you're doing something nice for the person. You think you're being a good person. But I think the proper attitude, the proper way to relate to pity, sympathy, compassion is with great suspicion. If there is a child and the child cannot help themselves because they have no agency or because they're very, very small, children tend to be short normally. They can't reach the high surfaces. They don't have credit cards, preferably, and they can't drive. They can't see over the steering wheel. So they have less agency in the world. You can pity, you can sympathize, you can offer compassion to a child, and then you can offer help to a child. But with an adult, you really can't. So here's where there's a couple of points where it gets tricky and where we can get Trojan horsed and we can actually, as empathic, kind people, we Trojan horse ourselves. So the first one would be pity sneaking in. I won't draw a Trojan horse, but if I was going to, how dare you laugh, Ben? Laughing at me. Here is how I would do it. Hey, that's not bad, it's not awful. So the pity gets snuck in. You think you're doing one thing, but inside of that, there's something else there. And, you know, as I said, people say, no, it's not pity, it's sympathy. It's not pity, it's compassion. Careful. You should view that with a lot of suspicion. If you do something in a relationship because you feel sorry for someone, let's just translate this because we all know what that means. It's very hard to linguistically wriggle around this one. If you do a thing because you feel sorry for somebody, that's where the problem is. So you have the assessment of the scenario, which then leads to a conclusion, which then typically leads to an assumed action. So this is another thing to be careful of. Say if I said to you, poor Bob, he's at work, he got fired again. Not his fault. The last 5 jobs he got fired from, he's so unlucky. Every time he goes, the boss is always an idiot, and it's not Bob's fault. Bob's a good guy, he's a good worker, but he just always gets fired. He's he's super unlucky, and he's got no money and he can't pay rent this month. These are statements. They may be true, they may not be true. These are an assessment. The conclusion that's implied here is Bob can't help himself. It's not his fault. He can't help himself. What's the assumed action that comes from the assessment and the conclusion? You would probably be worried that I, as an empathic, codependent fawn responder with poor interpersonal boundaries, is going to leap to, I should pay Bob's rent. I should pay his rent because I can. Which is, it's wrong to assume that that's going to happen, but it frequently, it's not wrong. It might be inaccurate and too presumptuous, but it frequently does. So if we say this person can't help themselves, and you agree with that assessment, and I feel sorry for them, and we agree with that assessment, then what comes in its wake, what comes in the wake of that Trojan horse is an assumed action. Oh, they can't help themselves. Oh, I feel so sorry for them. I'm going to do something to help them out. You don't say it, but it's lingering there in the air. When you're dealing with cluster B types, all cluster B types, no, not all, Richard. Some cluster B are really nice. No, they're not, because then they wouldn't be in the cluster B. They would be somewhere else. Now, we can wrangle over the specific definitions of things, but if the person is not entitled, they don't feel they're entitled to hurt other people for their own benefit, and they're not interpersonally exploitative, I'm not interested in hearing about them being on the cluster B, because they're not. They may have problems, sure, but really they don't belong here. For me, they'd have to be entitled, feel like they're entitled to hurt others. They have to be grandiose in some way, and they have to be interpersonally exploitative. So here we have narcissists, psychopaths, borderlines, histrionics. Narcissists, psychopaths, borderlines, and histrionics. And they frequently are comorbid in this cluster. Could the cluster B use pity? Could they use the tendency to feel sorry for others to slide in a Trojan horse? Absolutely. There are cases we know from research where psychopaths, now called antisocial personality disordered people, ASPD, were interviewed in American jails, and there was a very high prevalence of criminal psychopaths in jail, in prison, for their crimes, saying that they frequently use pity, sympathy, and the possibility to be seen as victimized in other people's eyes to gain leverage against them. So they'll have a sob story. They'll use sob stories. If English isn't your first language, I know some of you don't, who watch me, you don't have English as a first language. To sob is an old English word for crying. And we say sob story, you know what everybody who speaks English knows what a story is. A sob story, because it's what do you call that? Alliterative. It's SS, sob story, instead of saying cry story. So sobbing is crying, weeping. So the sob story is, oh, this terrible thing happened to me. They offer the sob story, they offer the sad story, trying to induce feelings of pity, sympathy, compassion, ultimately to feel sorry, so they can Trojan horse past the target's defenses and then get inside. And then once they're inside that person's boundaries and the gates get shut again, then the virus, the enemy soldiers can pop out at night and wreak absolute havoc on a cell, on a community whose defenses are down because they think they just have a nice wooden horse, a nice gift in their midst. They don't realize that it's full of a weaponized virus that's designed to destroy them from the inside out. So using sympathy, using pity, using compassion actually is a very, very common way that cluster B personality disordered people gain control and gain access over their targets. Where I know that it's been described explicitly and admitted to explicitly is in research involving American prisoners who did say that. And we know of cases where, there's famous cases where they used pity. Is it Ted Bundy who put his arm in a plaster cast, and he'd say, he'd go on the college campuses and he'd say, oh, my van's broken, I can't get it to work, and he'd have his arm in a plaster cast to get good, well-meaning, conscientious people to offer him that sympathy to bring their defenses down. So another Trojan horse that we need to be aware of, apart from this tendency to feel sorry for others and to want to offer them charity or to want to offer them compassion, is we also need to be very, 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 very careful. Conscientiousness. Conscientiousness. Do you believe I spelled that?
Is that right, yeah?
I think it is, It's got a lot of letters in it. Conscientiousness, the trait of being conscientious, is where you want to do right in your own eyes and in the eyes of other people. If you make a promise, you want to fulfill the promise. If you say you're going to turn up on time, you want to turn up on time. You're a man of your word. You're a woman of your word. If you say you're going to do it, you're going to do it. You treat everybody fairly, and you're very rigorous with yourself. You would never cheat. You would never steal. You would never lie. You tell the truth, and you do things in a very hyper-conscientious way. What a wonderful trait for a human being to have. And if everybody within inside of our cultures, within inside of our nations and our societies was high in trait conscientiousness and we had a low prevalence of cluster B personalities, it would be an infinitely better world. However, this isn't the world. And people who are very, very high in trait conscientiousness, they are extremely open. They have gaps in the cell wall through which cluster B personalities can creep in and lay the evil demonic eggs of their nasty intent inside the defenses. And one way that they'll get access is by appearing as a victim, by appearing as someone to be pitied, by appearing as somebody who is worthy of sympathy and compassion. Be careful going around pitying people, pitying nations, pitying groups. I think it's a very philosophically weak thing to do. You know, oh, I just feel so sorry for people. It's kind of patronizing. Who are you to feel sorry for anybody? You're just another meat suit in socks. You're not God, you're not a savior, you're not the Messiah. Some people aren't doing very well. You weren't doing very well for your whole life. There are areas of your life where even now you're not doing that well. Sort your own stuff out. It's a temptation. It's really tempting to pity others and through doing that, put yourself in the position of a virtuous saint. Be careful. Don't pity people. When you assess a situation and you create a conclusion, don't jump to an assumed action. This takes tremendous restraint and tremendous self-discipline and detachment to say, okay, this person is suffering. They're not doing very well. And all of these things are facts. They got fired from 5 jobs. This I know to be true. They're telling me that they've done the best they can. I know that it's true that they're telling me they've done the best they can, but I don't live inside their heads. I don't know what's in their hearts, what they really do and what they really think and what they really feel. I don't know that they weren't stealing in every job that they got fired from. Don't jump to an assumed action, just stay with the assessment. Beware of the fact that we know that all cluster B use sympathy as a way to get leverage over people, particularly psychopaths. And beware of your own conscientiousness. Don't be too conscientious. When you're dealing with people and you don't know whether they're talking to you on good or bad faith, you don't know whether they're in the personality disorder cluster B spectrum or not. They might not be, but they might be of evil intent. Don't just hand them over your conscientiousness as a gift. Be guarded until you know them better, until you know what their intent is. Be guarded, be careful, and remain vigilant of this kind of thing, because once this is inside, it is very, very, very hard to get out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you. Okay, folks, the new course, Unplug from the Matrix of Narcissistic Abuse, is out now, and if you're interested in finding out more about that, please click the link below.